Hey everybody, I have your sample test here, so I'd like to go over it with you. Please make corrections as we go, and if you have questions, you can reach out to me through email. I'm hoping to be back at school tomorrow, but that is not certain yet, and you will test either way, whether I'm there or not. So the first question asks, which numbers are equivalent to 130%? Circle all that apply. Remember that when we are converting percents to decimals, we move the decimal 2 times to the left, so that's 1.3, that's letter A. When we're writing percents as fractions, we put it over 100. You'll notice this answer is not here because it's not reduced. So dividing both the top and the bottom, we get 13 over 10. That's letter F. And if we change 13/10 into a mixed number, we also get letter B, 1 3/10. Question 2 asks, which numbers are equivalent to 0.6? Again, circle all that apply. So converting a decimal to a percent, we're going to move it 2 times to the right, so that's 60%. Once we know the percent, we can work with that to get our fraction, or we can also go back to the original decimal. That decimal is read as 6/10. So that 6 is in the tenths place. We write 6 over 10. You'll notice that answer is here, and it's not reduced. Dividing the top and the bottom by 2 also gives us 3/5, and that is letter E. And not really a trick here, but just something to kind of pay attention to. Letter C is actually also equivalent. Remember, with decimals, we can put zeros at the back of a decimal, and those are still equivalent decimals. So we get C, E, B, and D. Okay, moving on to number 3. The question is, what is 5% of 20? Remember that you can use the percent proportion or the percent equation. I'll use the proportion on some of these, and I'll use the equation on others. So we write the percent over 100, and that's equal to the part that we are trying to calculate over the whole. So we're going to cross multiply. 100x is equal to 5 times 120, that's 600. Dividing both sides by 100, we get x equals 6. Number 4, 18 is 80% of what number? So let's go ahead and use the equation on this one. So 18 is your part. So we're going to take 18 and we're going to set that equal to the percent times the whole, and we don't know the whole. Remember, with the equation, we do need to change the percent to a decimal. We're going to multiply that by x because, again, we don't know the whole. We're going to divide both sides by 0.8. And 18 divided by 0.8 is 22.5. So we get letter B. Moving over to number 5, what percent of 36 is 24? So in this example, I'll go back to the proportion. We don't know the percent, so we're going to put the x over 100 and then the part over the whole. So we're going to cross multiply. 36 times x is 36x. 100 times 24 is 2400. And we're going to divide both sides by 36. And we get 66.6 repeating. Remember that this is a percent. And so that is also letter B. 6 and 7 are both percent of change questions, and there were a lot of questions from you yesterday on this. You couldn't remember how to do it. So in these examples, remember that we want to take the difference. We want to subtract the two numbers first, and then we always want to divide by the original amount. So we have a percent increase here because we're going up from 10 to 12. So we're going to do 12 minus 10. That gives us 2. And then 2 divided by the original, which was 10, is 0.2. We want to change that decimal to a percent, and we get letter A, 20%. Number 7, it's a decrease because it's going down from 40 to 30. But again, we're going to subtract. 40 minus 30 is 10. And we want to divide by the original, which in this case was the bigger number of 40. 10 over 40 is 0.25. Moving the decimal 2 times to the right, that's 25%. Move on to the back. Talia wanted to hit 20 home runs this season. She ended up hitting 150% of her goal. How many home runs did Talia hit this season? In this example, we're just going to be calculating 150% of her goal, which is 20 home runs. So if we use the equation here and we want to find what is 150%, I'm going to go ahead and use the percent equation. I'm going to change that percent to a decimal. Notice that the decimal is now, it's not in front of the 1, but it's still behind it. Percents bigger than 100 give you decimals that are bigger than 1. So we're going to do 1.5 or 1.50 times 20, and that's going to give us 30 home runs. A shirt with a price of $24 was on sale for 30% off its original price. What was the price for the shirt after the discount? Remember, make sure you're reading these questions very carefully tomorrow on the test. Are we actually asking you just for the amount of the discount? Are we asking you for the new price? Same with questions about tips and taxes. Just make sure you're reading carefully. So this, we want to know what is the price of the shirt when we go pay for it at the register. So if we're trying to calculate 30% of 24, because that's the original price of the shirt, we're going to cross multiply. I'm using the proportion here. You can use the equation. Thirty times 24 is 720. Oops. And then we're going to divide both sides by 100. X equals $7.20. Now remember, this is the amount of the discount. If we're trying to find out the price of the shirt after the discount, now we need to go back to our original price of $24 and subtract $7.20 from it. This gives you $16.80. Question 10, Tom ate at a restaurant. His bill was $12. He left a 15% tip. Determine whether each statement about Tom's payment is true or false. So the first question says Tom paid more than $12 for his lunch, including the tip. Okay, that's definitely true. A tip is going to make it more expensive, and his bill was already $12. Tom paid $1.80 for the tip. Tom paid $1.20 for the tip. Tom paid $13.80 for lunch, including the tip. So let's go ahead and just calculate the tip. We're going to find 15%, changing the percent to a decimal, of $12. So we're going to take 12 times 0.15, and that's $1.80. So there's your tip. So that makes letter B false or true and letter C false. And then when we want to calculate the total that he pays, it's the $12 plus the $1.80, which is $13.80, and that leaves letter D to also be true. So beginning with the constructed response, the first set of problems ask you to write each decimal or fraction as a percent. So when you're given a decimal, we're just moving the decimal 2 times to the right. That's the same as multiplying by 100, and we get 32%. For question 2, some of you know what 1/3 is as a decimal. That's definitely helpful. If not, you have to tip and divide. Or we have calculators. For this portion on the test, there's only 2 questions like these. And so you have your calculator. You can just type in 1 divided by 3. But if you have this one memorized, it's 0.3 repeating. Remember that when you have a repeating decimal, you're also going to have a repeating percent. So this is all 3's in this decimal. So the answer for 1/3 as a percent is 33.3 repeating percent. Question 3, we're going to move the decimal 2 times to the right, so that is 150%. Again, remember that decimals or numbers bigger than 1 are percents that are greater than 100. Question 4, also moving it 2 times to the right. Remember also we fill in these spots here that don't have digits with zeros, so we get 80%. If you don't know that 1/5 is 0.2. Again, you can do long division or use the calculator. 1 divided by 5, 0.2. Moving that 2 times to the right gives us 20%. Hopefully 3/4 you know, 0.75, and that will give 75%. Don't forget, if you are asked to give it as a percent, you do have to have the percent symbol. 7, 8, and 9 are asking for the percent to be written as a decimal and as a fraction. So make sure that if this question, or if there are questions like this on the test, again, you're reading those directions very carefully. So 30% as a decimal, we move the decimal 2 times to the left. That's the same as dividing by 100. You could write 0.30, or you could just write 0.3. Either answer would be acceptable. This decimal ends in the tenths place, so we write 3/10. If you're looking back at the percent and you start with 30/100, remember that you just have to reduce. We're going to divide the top and the bottom by 10, but that's also how you get 3/10. Question 8 is 6%. Moving the decimal 2 times to the left gives us 0.06. Remember that single digit percents have that 0 after the decimal place. Writing the percent as a fraction, we put it over 100. This fraction is not reduced. We need to divide the top and the bottom by 2. Both of these numbers are divisible by 2, and we get 3/50. Number 9, 110%. Only move the decimal twice. It doesn't matter how many digits are in the percent. So that's 1. And you can stop at the 1 here. You can put the 0 in the back, but again, you don't have to. So it's either 1.10 or just 1.1. We want to write that percent over 100. So that's 110 over 100. Again, dividing the top and the bottom by 10 gives us 11/10. You could go one step further and write it as a mixed number, but remember, we can keep things improper. Okay, moving on to the next set of questions. Again, you're probably either using the percent proportion or the percent equation, and I'll kind of mix it up again. So it says 5 is 20% of what number? So if you're using the equation, that's part equals percent times whole. So 5 equals, I have to change the percent to a decimal, and I don't know the whole, so I'm dividing both sides here by 0.2. And on number 10, x equals 25. For 11, let's use the proportion. What percent of 45 is 18? So we don't know the percent. 18 is our part and 45 is our whole. Cross multiplying, 45x equals 1800. Then we're going to divide both sides by 45. And we get x equals 40%. Question 12 says, what is 35% of 250? So if we go back to the equation here, we don't know the part this time. The percent changed to a decimal, 0.35, and the whole is 250. So this time we just have to multiply these two numbers together. 0.35 times 250 is 87.5. 13 is back to a percent of change question. Remember that this is from lesson 5.3, so I was having a lot of you refer back to your math notes yesterday in class, so make sure you have that handy and you know where to access this lesson from, but it's 5.3. So again, we're going to subtract 12 minus 9, and that's 3. Then we take 3 and we divide it by the original number, or the first number. 3 divided by 9 is 1/3. If you remember from earlier, we already wrote that as a percent, but in your calculator, you do get 0.3 repeating. And again, that's 33.3 repeating percent. Question 14 is a percent of change question, but this time we know the percent of change, we just don't know how many it was. So it says last year 120 students were sick at school. This year 20% fewer students are sick. How many students are sick this year? So remember from this lesson that when we calculating percent of change, and I'm going to abbreviate a little bit, we're taking the amount of change and dividing it by the original. So if we look at this like an equation, there's three parts here, and we know two of them. We know the percent of change is 20%. We don't know how much it changed by, but we do know the original number of students. So in order to solve this equation, and you can reference your notes, I believe it was an example about a laptop. It might have been like example 4 and extra example 4. We're multiplying both sides by 120. We're trying to get this x by itself. So if it's being divided by 120, we're going to multiply both sides by 120. And I think on this one, yep, I did. I forgot to change the percent to a decimal. Oops. So taking 120 times 0.20, we get 24. Now that's not how many students are sick this year. This is how many fewer students were sick this year. So now we have to take 120 and subtract 24 from it, and we get 96 students. Please make sure you are using labels on your answers. Moving on to the last page, we have a couple more questions here. An item had an original price of $5. It had a percent markup of 45%. What was the value of the markup? Okay, so here's where it's important to make sure you're reading the directions. We just want to know how much the markup was. So in this one, you can use the percent equation or the proportion. 45 over 100 equals x over 5. We cross multiply. 100x we get 225, 45 times 5, dividing both sides by 100, and we get $2.25. Please make sure your answer has a dollar sign. It does not ask you for the new price of the item with the markup, it just asks for the markup. And the last question, Deidre bought a car in California. The price of the car was $32,000. California has an 8% sales tax. That is not accurate. I think it's more like 12. How much did Deidre pay for the car, including the sales tax? So again, you can use the proportion or the equation. I'll go ahead and use the equation this time. So we're trying to find 8%. Be careful with your decimal here. It's 0.08 of the $32,000. This is going to tell us how much the sales tax was. So 0.08 times 32,000 is $2,560. But this wants to know how much she paid for the car, including the tax. Remember, tax makes things more expensive, so we're going to add these two numbers together, and we get $34,560. So hopefully you did pretty well on this. Remember, if you do have any questions, you can reach out to me. Again, we're going to take the test tomorrow regardless if I'm there or not. Remember, too, we also had some questions on that scavenger hunt kind of around the room, the Who Killed Mr. Prop. And a lot of questions on that back side of that paper hat were two steps, where something was on sale, but then there was also a tax. Or there was a markup, and then there was a tax. So make sure you do understand how to do questions like that because you are going to see some of those on the test. And again, just make sure you're really reading those directions. I hope you have a good night.